I finally moved to Switzerland. I finally moved to Switzerland. No, this is not a gap year. This is not an F2 abroad. This is a move to Switzerland where I am pursuing my training as a doctor in internal medicine. We don't actually have that exist in the UK, but it's part of the many differences that I'm going to talk about in the next couple of videos. So if you've got any burning questions about life in Switzerland, about the training there, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments down below or on Instagram so that I can plan them into further videos. Anyways, back to the topic. So, as you'll know from my last video, I quit my job as a junior doctor in the NHS. And since then, I've been able to get my degree recognised in Switzerland and started work as a trainee. Now, I'm sure that begs the question of why the move? Why quitting the job? And I've already briefly gone into it in the last video. There's lots of aspects that can be improved in the UK healthcare system, and it's going to be really interesting to make videos comparing the system in Switzerland and the system in the UK. And definitely working as a junior doctor, there were very difficult moments that could have been avoided or could have been less difficult with regards to staffing level, paperwork that should no longer be paperwork but more digitalized, the system breaking down, lots of aspects that make the day-to-day work more difficult and less enjoyable. But all in all, I can say in absolute honesty that the training that I received in the UK and the experience that I had working in the UK was excellent, and I would recommend it to anyone. And the training depends on so many factors. A, your eagerness to learn and take on opportunities. B, which placement you're actually on, which hospital you're in, and also the environment. During COVID, it was very, very intense. So in a way, the training was good because it was very hands-on, but then also there was less teaching opportunities, there were less formal sessions going on. And so, there's ups and downs in every situation. And so even now, I can't speak for the whole of the UK system. I can only speak from my experience. But I don't want you to think that I left the UK because I thought the training was really bad. That is not the reason. I don't know when I'm planning on returning to the UK, maybe to pursue part of my training, maybe after my training. I don't know right now. And I'm not really thinking about that because I'm just taking it one step at a time. But if you are considering going to the UK for your training, 100%, that there are downsides to any system. But all in all, it was a great privilege and honour working in the NHS alongside fantastic colleagues. And I do think that the quality of training was very good. So honestly, and in a very brief summary, for me, it was mostly family reasons. I had always planned to move closer to family in the long term. COVID accelerated that. And so I'm here in Switzerland and I've got lots of family around, and that's been a really big change in my day-to-day life, being able to see them without having to take a flight or not being able to take a flight because of COVID. So yeah, that's been a really big advantage. There's obviously things that I miss about the UK, things that I miss about the NHS, and being a doctor in a system that I know very well, that I'm used to, that I was planning on staying in. But I have to remind myself, because it's easy to forget, that there are good things and advantages to every situation. And even though a decision makes sense, it can be difficult, especially when it's taking you out of your comfort zone. And I think there's always a fine balance between not staying in your comfort zone, but not being way out of your comfort zone where actually it's detrimental for your progress, for your mental health, because it's just too much, and finding that balance in the middle. And I'm not gonna lie, moving to Switzerland has brought about many different changes, many different challenges. This deserves a couple of videos of its own right, but just basic things like language. So in Switzerland, there are 4 national languages, so French, Italian, German, which isn't typical German, it's Swiss German, and a language called Romansh, which is only spoken in one specific canton. And even though I was thankfully already fluent in spoken French, I had a written French level of about A-levels, where I had spent 2 weeks preparing for it, and I basically write how I hear things. So I definitely had to work on that. I'm still working on that, because when you do discharge letters and you fill in the patient's folder, there's lots of writing to do, and that has definitely been a challenge and a learning curve. Then there's also getting used to a different system, healthcare system entirely. There's still things I'm learning about how it actually works and how it changes the management of the patient. Is it a system where people go to their GP first of all? Are there lots of polyclinics before going to ED? So in every country you'll discover, what the patient's expectations are based on the system that they're used to. And that really does change the day-to-day approach to medicine. Not just that, but working in a different size hospital. So the hospital I'm currently working in is much smaller than the one I was used to in the UK. And even in the UK, you'll notice this difference when you're going from a small hospital to a larger hospital. The medicine is very different. For example, in the middle of your night shift in a small hospital, you won't necessarily be able to request a CT scan. You won't necessarily have an intensive care unit or even an ED department. So knowing what the limitations of your institution is and what that means in terms of healthcare is that you rely much more on your clinical acumen, your history, your examination, basic investigations that you can get. It's a luxury that you can get used to in a big hospital where you can just request, a dozen investigations straight away. And in a way, it makes medicine easier because you've got the answers in front of you a lot of the time. But then the downside of that is that you rely less on your clinical acumen, and that's a shame in terms of your training as a doctor. We were always told, I remember as a junior doctor, make sure that when you're requesting something, whether that be bloods or other investigations, scans, images, make sure you know why you're requesting it and is it going to change your management plan. And that's really, really important because there's no point, let's say for an end-of-life patient, to request lots of invasive investigations if actually you're not going to treat them. They've clearly stated they don't want any active treatment. You need to know why you're requesting investigations. That's something I think can be dangerous if you only do your training in very big hospitals, because you'll get used to that way of doing things. I think the best is always finding a middle ground. And I'm grateful to have both of these experiences in my training, because you definitely have a different approach when you're limited in terms of the investigations you can do. And, the question may not be how closely do we need to observe this patient while we're treating with antibiotics or blah, blah, blah. It may more be, when is the point that we need to transfer them because the patient is tiring, and on the ABG we can see that the CO2 is coming up and he may need ventilatory support, which you don't have in your hospital. So these are all things you need to take into account, which are very different to what I'm used to. And like I said, I'm planning on making videos about the differences here, not just as the healthcare system, but also as the country, what the cultural differences are, the religious liberties and differences compared to the UK, the training, what it's like and what the quality of training has been, financially what the differences are. So there's lots of things to talk about here and I can't put it all in this video. But at the end of the day, patients will be patients, and your job as a doctor is to be able to build that relationship of trust and then do your best with your clinical acumen, the investigations that you can request, to identify the issues and be able to manage them accordingly, taking the patient's wishes into account. So that's going to be the same across the board in every country, although your approach may be different and the tools that you have and the system within which you do it can also be very different. You can imagine how difficult and frightening it can be going from medical student to F1. At least it's in a system that you're accustomed with, you've been on placements, you know what the hospitals are like, you know how it's run if you've been on your placements, obviously. So imagine what it's like to be in a different country. And I found that that's when your perspective and the voice inside your head is very important. It's paramount actually, because if your approach is rooted on fear and focused on what's lacking in your abilities as a trainee and in your abilities to adapt, it can be very difficult because it blocks you rather than motivates you to get used to this new situation. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been difficult. I've struggled. Some days have been really tough, other days have been better. All in all, now it's a lot more manageable than it was in the beginning. But I think it would be a disservice to myself and all of you to pretend that a big move like this, a big change like this, doesn't have its consequences and isn't a challenge. And like I said, there are many advantages that come with it and also some difficulties. So if you're considering a big change in your life, whether it be medicine or otherwise, whether it be in your training or otherwise, one point that really helped me, that family members and close friends have reminded me of, is the approach of what's the worst that can happen. And it's an age-old, approach, but I think it's very effective. And essentially you ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? In my situation, if I said, well, worst case scenario, this is a disaster, I can't adapt, I can't get used to the system, and I leave after a couple of months or after a year, which hasn't happened. But let's just say that that were the case. One of the main reasons that I was attracted to medicine is the growth potential. There's so much opportunity to learn continuously, whether that be clinical or socially. You're always working with a multidisciplinary team, which means that you've got your doctor colleagues, the nurses, the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, the dietitians, the porters, the cleaners. There's so many members of the team, and learning how to build good communication to run a smooth and efficient team, for me, that's an opportunity for growth. Being able to teach other students or other colleagues, that's an opportunity for growth. There's so many opportunities in medicine. That's something that I love, that I look for, even though it can be scary, even though it puts me out of my comfort zone. So let's just say I've definitely put myself in a situation where I'm faced with lots of newness and challenges that I need to adapt to, and I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I'm trying to stay grounded and make sure that I don't get too far out of my comfort zone where actually it's slowing me down rather than anything. And it's always going to be a balance, obviously. And I went into this profession looking for a job that would continuously push me to learn new things. And so if I look at it that way, this whole new experience, rather than it seeming like a massive decision where, you know, I'm uprooting my life and leaving the system that I know, leaving the people that I know, people I did training with, to something much less scary where it's a new opportunity, potential for growth, potential for learning, and worst case scenario doesn't work out. That's okay. I would still have learned so much from this experience. So if there's any advice that I want to leave you with that I constantly remind myself of, is don't be impatient. Trust in the process, give it time, and you'll be okay. The next couple of videos are probably going to be on-call videos in Switzerland, which will be interesting because you'll see that there are some things that are very similar and maybe some things that are slightly different. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you have any specific questions or experiences that you've had that you'd like to share, drop them in the comments down below. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!